let's come back as a large group. And I think we had 4 different groups working. So, yep. Okay, Allison, can you report out for your group? Ladies. Yeah.
Anne and Rebecca, and what we wanted was to work with schools and have a school mandated curriculum that incorporated a school garden and used the food from the garden in the cafeteria. So the second question, who can give it to you, it would be a school, so the school administrators. And we talked about starting small, working in one school as a pilot. So we're really talking about the school level. Third question, what do they need to hear? We thought it would be important for them to hear that it's been done before, that it can be done. They would need to hear the benefits of it and know that it's safe to use the food from the garden. There are specific ways that can be done. And I mentioned knowing the benefits, but more specifically, it's a way to introduce the foods to the kids and get the kids outside and doing some different things and just enrich the curriculum in general. And then the last question, who do they need to hear it from? We talked about having other people who have done it before, so other schools,
I know what's going on.
whoever that might be, who can say, yes, it can be done, this is how we did it. We thought it would be important for students and parents to voice their opinions and express that they want things like this. And then it would also be important for the administrators to hear from teachers who are willing to do that kind of work at their school.
Very good.
Okay, I think okay, so what group wants to go next?
Okay. So we want to get loan forgiveness if you're a young farmer and you're only applying for loan forgiveness for our student loans. That is what we want. Who can give that to us? Well, the federal government, Department of Education, the USDA might become our buddy because we can tell them about how we can build a workforce of younger farmers, which will give them more opportunities to pursue their educational initiatives like farm to school. What do they need to hear? Is that the next question? So I guess what they need to hear is that farming is truly a public service and there's a shortage of farmers, so we need to address that and grow some more young farmers. And just, I guess, some reality checks about how passionately invested young people are today in sustainable agriculture, but they're just having difficulties getting it off the ground. And then who do they need to hear it from? We came up with three recent grads that are eager to get involved in the food economy but are having financial issues, and one of those things could be student loans. Like people that have experiences with financial obstacles that could have gone better if there was some other financial opportunity for them available through government like this. And then the National Young Farmers Coalition, which is obviously a bunch of young farmers aligned.
All right, next group.
We chose the task of trying to get more local food products into local stores. And by local stores, we meant a grocery store in our area. Could be chain stores or could be locally owned stores. So first question, that's number one. Secondly, who we would need to, who could give it to us? That would be corporate officers in the case of the big chain stores like a Super One food store. Or it could be store managers, owners, if it's a locally owned grocery store. What do they need to hear? They need to hear that they're either losing customers to other stores that are even outside of the local area because those stores are providing locally grown produce and they're not, or that they may attract new customers or more customers customers who are looking for local products. And that this could improve their overall sales, because once these people get to the store, then they're gonna buy other products while they're there. And who do they need to hear it from? They need to hear it from the customers, and particularly regular customers who maybe shopped in the store and then left to go seek locally grown or organic grown produce elsewhere. And especially those in the case of the bigger stores, such as a Kroger, that have customer feedback. They know who their local or their regular customers are. They know what products they're buying. So they need to hear from those people who are regular customers. That's it.
Next group?
We also did the school issues, kind of incorporating gardens, harvest of the month, and also what to do with excess, and also providing access. We decided that kind of number one, what do you want, is going to be a basic 10% of food in schools being locally sourced, whether it comes from a garden at the school or local buyers, whatever the case may be. Maybe a little bit of a sliding scale, a certain amount comes from a garden versus buyers, depending on the size of the school and what the garden could provide. Who can give it to you? Independent nonprofits, local businesses, school board and PTA, and local farmers who might be mentors, assistants, provide knowledge, that kind of stuff. What do they need to hear? Basically a cost analysis. Is it going to cost the school anything? Is it going to cost parents anything? That kind of stuff. Level of interest from both students as well as farmers maybe being willing to be mentors. And also one of the things that we put in, how gardening provides positive measurable outcomes and real world skills. Students have increased test scores and are often understand concepts better because they put it to use. And then 4, who do they need to hear it from? Basically the level of interest from the students. That needs to be the place it starts a lot of times. And that, to get that started, is a lot of education, but also local farmers who they need to hear it from. I think our big thing who they need to hear it from is students. They need to say, we want this, how do we get it?
So, that's great work, and all over dinner. And you have good ideas, and you've isolated certain things that you can do. And just hearing you talk, and again, my experience is in Michigan, so I'm going to bring up 2 programs from Michigan that have happened that I think touch on everything that you've talked. So you were about young farmers having financial struggles, and both of you guys were about, both your 2 groups were about school gardens. So in Michigan last year, through Michigan State Extension, they have started a program called Hoop Houses for Health. So young farmers, or small farmers, doesn't have to be young farmers, but it's mostly young farmers, will get financing for a hoop house on their farm so they can produce year round. They get that as a forgiven loan as long as they have a relationship with a school. That the caveat with the school is that it has to be 50% free or reduced lunch in the population, and they provide food from their hoop house to that school, and then they have a relationship also. They have an obligation to do work inside the school with curriculum around that. So that gets to, that's just an instance of something that's happened around that.
It's called Hoop Houses for Health.
Hoop Houses for Health. Now, for you guys with the grocery store. Sure. So the hoop houses, they grow a series of things because you have long, harsh summers, we have long, harsh winters. You can grow all year round in December in a hoop house in Michigan. A lot of the stuff in The winter is greens, so kale, spinach, things like that. But then also, you can get tomatoes pretty early, at least for Michigan. So it might be late here.
I think May.
What?
May is when you guys can start getting them in hoop houses.
Yeah.
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 We're on our second growing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and your program made me think of a local chain in Michigan. It's called Bush's. And I'll get to it later, we have a food hub learning and innovation network. And one of the things they did is they reached out to grocery stores and grocery stores and said, what do we need to do? What do you need to get more local product? And they said, relationships. We need to know what's possible. And we need to know that we can get a certain amount of product at a certain time. So they, in an instance, is an egg producer. And there's an egg co-op in Big Michigan, and they had always just sold locally. Now they sell in every single Bush's store. And how I, as a consumer, have changed is that one of my friends and colleagues is a farmer, and that I will only buy my eggs at Bush's because I know the farmer and I know where it came from. And Bush's now local. They mark everything that comes from Michigan. And anything that's come from a local farm, they label it and they have the name of the farm. And that's just a store-wide policy now. And that's happened in the last 5 years. And so they've taken that value that they know their customers have labeled it, and then market that. So by building a relationship and talking to folks at a higher level within the corporation. So you're absolutely on the right track.
And I've seen that in North Carolina. There's
Mhm.
a grocery store chain called Harris Teeter.
Okay.
Some of you have heard of them. And they're doing that labeling. I just noticed when I was visiting there that
Mhm.
all the products that come from North Carolina farms, they'll put an extra tag on the shelf
Mhm.
below that product that says North Carolina product.
Yeah.
Berkshire's is doing that with Shreveport,
Our
but it's
Berkshire's
just
just started that too.
local.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
saying where, what farm.
It's just from Louisiana, and it's, I mean, there's not produce that has
Mm.
that label. It's things like, bespoke sausage and things like
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, at Bush's actually, you can go to the produce stand and they'll say, this lettuce is from this farm, and whatnot. So more like getting that farmer's market experience. And with the eggs that I was talking about, actually the eggs are in pallets. And I, as a customer, I have to put my own eggs in my own carton. But that's no skin off my back as long as I don't let my sons do it. But they changed the way they did things so that local egg co-op could do things so that they don't have to package every single one, because that's more time and it's harder for them to ship it. So there are things that can be done, but you have to talk to the right people. So, all right, and one of the ways you can talk to the right people and build networks is through food policy councils. So we're going to take the rest of the evening and talk about that. So if you can advance the slide. This is a definition of the food policy councils. Can everybody read that? Or should I read it out loud? It's too small? So, convene citizens and government officials for the purpose of providing a comprehensive examination of a state or local food system. This unique, nonpartisan form of civic engagement brings together a diverse array of food system stakeholders to develop food and agriculture policy recommendations. So what exactly does a food policy council do? And it's not all about policy, actually. But there are a number of them. The first one was formed in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1982, and it was around hunger and access issues. But according to the Center for a Livable Future at Johns Hopkins University, which in the food policy council world is a great resource, they did a survey in 2014 and found in North America there are 263 councils. And it's worthwhile to look also at Canada. Toronto's Food Policy Council I think is like the granddaddy. They've done everything you could do as a food policy council. They've run their own CSA. They've done a study about how you could actually source 20% of the food needed for the food shed of Toronto and the 40 acres surrounding the city. They've done some pretty amazing stuff. But any food policy council can do any one of these things. Number one, they're a forum for discussing food issues. So even having people come and talk about what your food issues are, things like that we've done tonight, that's something that the Food Policy Council can do. And in fact, when food policy councils first start, this is kind of what they do for their first 2 years. Is talk about what the food system is, what are the issues, what needs to change, what needs to stay the same, what can we make better. They also foster coordination in between the sectors of the food system. I think we've seen tonight when we talked about policy in food systems, how many different silos there are. I heard in small groups people saying, well, this group talks about this group regulates this, but these folks don't talk to each other. And so that's one of the things that Food Policy Council can do, is to bring those people together to talk around a table about shared and common issues. It can also evaluate and influence policy. And this is where having an extension service or a research university associated with your Food Policy Council is really, really valuable. It doesn't even have to be somebody local. You just need to find a researcher who's interested in your issues and then have them help you out. They also launch and support programs and services addressing local needs. So sometimes it's not that we need to change the policy, it's that we need a program to get this done. And a lot of that is often around community gardening and also in terms of, I would say, a farmer's market is a programming piece in education. So.
I'm sorry, you said it usually it was about 2 years?
Yeah. Like the first 2 to 3 years is like assessment, discussion, trying to get everybody together, figuring it out. And that can be, if you are a process-oriented person, that period can be very, very hard. So like there's a personality testing of P's and J's, and P's are huge big picture people and love to roll around in these big huge issues and talk about them. I am not a P, I'm a J. We're gonna do this and this and this and this, and that's our goal point, and I can see that and we're gonna get to it, but I can see these 6 steps. And you're not even talking about step 3, we're still on step 1, you're driving me nuts. But one of the things about this is a diverse coalition. So you're gonna have different personality types, so you have to account for those. You need to build strong reciprocal relationships. And so that's give and take. And it's just not, there's not gonna be one way. And then also thoughtful and strategic communication. And in these things, words really, really, really do matter. And so really thinking about what the message is, and also your invitation of having people participate and being respectful and cognizant of their context is important. And part of that is having the right folks at the table. A lot of times when you're talking food policy, people will go immediately to these sectors. Do we have something for production? Do we have something for consumption? Do we have something from processing? Do we have something from distribution? Do we have something from waste recycling? Okay, we have all these, we're gonna check. But really also, this is about a community food system, and so are all the folks represented? And you can have food justice advocates, educators, nonprofits, citizens, government officials, because they know that context, farmers, grocers, food workers, processors, distributors, and recycling companies. And those represent those sectors, but also, if you could go to the next slide, look at, do you really represent the diversity of your community? And this might get a little bit harder because sometimes also within that diversity, it's hard to get everybody to the table at the same time. So your traditional way of meeting folks and interacting with folks may not always be the best way. So do you have a diversity of representation in your Food Policy Council? And maybe it's not, hopefully it should be in the leadership. Maybe that's not possible at this point, but also just having people who are coming and giving their opinion and are welcome to input in terms of income, race, gender, geography. Do you have everybody, if you're looking at central Louisiana, do you have somebody from every parish there? Because what's different on the eastern end of the region is different than the western end? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Religion. And religion has a lot to do. A lot of religions also influence what people eat. And then also immigrant groups. And so what's culturally appropriate? And immigrant groups often, in order for them to feel welcome, they need to see their food, or they need to be able to grow their food. And there's also cultural heritage that maybe in some of these other groups that are in there, and especially for Native American peoples. Then also kind of look at this socio-ecological model. So again, your big picture people, you're gonna love this. What can they, let's start at the individual and like, what are their skills and the mindset and the things that individual brings to the table? What are their interpersonal relationships? A lot of times, you may want somebody with that interpersonal relationship who has a lot of connections to the community, who can bring a lot of people in. Because they have this network either of family or social or whatnot. But then also organizations and what those organizations bring. If you're looking at financial change, do you have a banker at the table or somebody who's representing a bank or foundation or somebody who represents those financial institutions and what they want to see in order to fund this type of work? Where are they in the community? And we kind of talked about different sectors of that, but then also where can they plug in with the public policy? And all of these things come together. So one of the things that we're going to do is I'm going to hand out a worksheet for you to think about this, about who should be in the, John, is it okay if I use your?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's the name of the Food Council?
Central Louisiana Local Foods Working Group.
Okay, so use the stakeholder analysis. I'm going to hand it out. Everybody can have a copy, but you can work in groups if you're more comfortable than that. And with that, think about the things that we've talked about and who should be on there. You don't have to write necessarily a name, although John would probably love one, and emails and whatnot. But what stakeholder they are, what sector of the food system they represent, a type of organization, where they live and work, their demographic representation, but also, again, going back to that social ecological model, what is their potential contribution?
So with the potential contribution, should we talk about, okay, this is a member that we want to have a voting, like that we want there all the time, or just like a peripheral resource?
You could do both. You could write that down.
Okay.
So, or it could be, I know that, their potential contribution could be, I know they could get 50 people to a meeting. Or they know the food distributors in this area very well.
We already have Catholics and Baptists on our, so we have all the religions covered.
Is it?
Got it all, diversity, all the diversity we need.
I am not in Michigan anymore.
I just told her from attending your food policy council meetings, y'all should be named the mall. It's middle-aged white women. Mostly.
We have
Welcome to the local food
token.
system.
I know, we have
Welcome to
a
the
token.
local food system, seriously.
Like, you're there and you're our token man.
Lee was there.
And Lee's the token man. Okay, 2 men.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a group of,
Okay, so we need at least 5 men on those lists collectively.
I don't think I count as the younger.
No, it's a big challenge. It's easy to say, but it's harder to get.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm excited. I'm excited that Kenzie's gonna be around. Even if it's middle-aged white women. But you have a broader global perspective that I'm lacking.
See how she just sucked you in?
That's
You're
right.
very
Yeah.
now.
That's why I like when Ann gets to come to meetings, because Ann has a global perspective as well as the educator.
I'm practicing my used car salesman boots. Is it working? Where's the key?
All right, well, while you're writing, and maybe you need to mull it over, or you could even take it home and then tell John later. Again, it's important to have those people at the table. And like in Michigan, we just had an instance of it there was a urban agriculture livestock group, because there's a lot of people in Michigan who want backyard chickens and backyard bees and backyard goats, and there's some regulations and things that go into that. And there was a working group on it, and actually to our network of local food councils, we had somebody come and report. And she said, well, you know, I was one of 15 people on that group, and it was appointed by the Michigan Department of Agriculture. She said, I was the only urban grower, and there were 5 other growers, but they were all from rural. And there were no people of color. And a lot of our cities where folks want this, it's predominantly African American. And she said, I almost quit just out of ethical, she said she had a real ethical dilemma about whether to stay. But you could definitely see in what their conclusions were, where those voices weren't there. And so when you're crafting that policy, it's very important to have all those folks at the table. So, all right. So while you're ruminating and giving and contributing all sorts of new nominees to the working group, we'll go on and talk a few more things about local food councils. So how do they start? What do they do? In the beginning, like I said, sometimes they're enabled by a government. The one in my county is the Washtenaw County Local Food Policy Council. It was enabled by the county commissioners. Every time I'm on this little tiny action team that deals with planning and zoning, there's only 3 of us that meet, but we always have to post our agenda and post all our minutes on the website because we're subject to the Opens Meeting Act. So that's an example, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes they're working groups or citizens groups. So this doesn't need to be something that is enabled by your government. It can be a group of people coming together. How are the members selected? Sometimes there is a selection process or a nomination process, and there definitely is in the one in my county because, again, the county commissioners select who's on the board. You have to put your name in to be nominated. Really, if you put your name in, they're going to take you because not everybody's clamoring for these spots. Also, it's kind of, you get into when the bylaws and things, how is leadership selected? Because usually there's a steering committee that does a lot of that work. And they make decisions maybe on a weekly or a monthly basis that the whole membership may not be part of, and it's important to know how those people are selected and, again, how they're represented. How are decisions made? There's one group in Flint, Michigan called Edible Flint. They do everything by consensus. Every committee meeting, every steering committee meeting, everything. It all has to be by consensus. Yes, as you know, that process, it's long and it's hard, but really for everybody to buy in that community, because there's been so much strife over the years, that's how business has to be done. And they all know that, and they've all made that commitment. So others, it's by a majority vote. And then we're done. What's the funding? And that funding can definitely influence how that group grows and where it grows and where it is. Sometimes you get a grant from a foundation and it has certain goals and objectives or mandates or measures, and that's going to push you in a certain direction. So those things are, and also, is the funding sustainable? A lot of food policy councils get grants from foundations. Foundations do not want to fund things indefinitely. They are really good funders for about 4 to 8 years. They are not an indefinite funder. Whereas if you're enabled by a government, the government may give you a certain amount every year. And you really don't need that much also sometimes as a food policy council just to do your daily business. It may be that you have somebody that's a backbone organization that does in-kind work where they set the meeting agendas, they set up the places, they do all the logistics, they record the minutes, and then you can do work from there. Yeah, so John plays that role at this point. Advance. Later, again, kind of segueing into that, who does that work? Is it that leadership? Maybe it's just a steering committee and they do a lot of the lead work. Again, using the example that I'm most familiar with, my food policy council in Washtenaw County, it's the planning action teams. we do the bulk of the work. We're all volunteers, but there's one in planning and zoning, there's one in waste recycling, there's one working with farmers, there's one working with processors, then there's one working with schools. So each of those then do their own work on an agreed upon plan and then report back to the larger council. Also, sometimes you will have the great gift of staff. Those are usually 1 to 2 people. Often it is time donated by another organization, be it an economic development group, be it extension, or be it a university. Also, health departments have played a big role too in donating time. You can advance the next slide. What do they do? It is very important, no matter what the structure is, to have a strategic plan. To have an agreed upon set of things that we are going to do. That strategic plan needs to be community based, and that's why your first 2 to 3 years you do a lot of work about what the food system is and what we're all interested in working on. Because if that is not organic, you are not going to get stuff done. If there is one individual leading the charge and they have an agenda and they say, and they get everybody on this boat, I guarantee if not everybody, people are going to get off that boat and that poor person is going to be there by him or herself. So it needs to be community-based. It needs to represent all those folks and all those different sectors of the food system and agreed upon. And it's hard to get to that point. You often need to have a skilled facilitator to do that. So many of these councils, what they'll do in the beginning is their backbone organization or a foundation or some sort of funding source will help them to get and hire a facilitator to walk them through, listen to everybody, but then get that strategic plan. That strategic plan needs to have SMART goals. So who was here from the last time? Do you remember what SMART goals are?
Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic. What's the T?
Timely. So, and again, as I said, that strategic plan is not built in a day. And I brought you an example of a strategic plan. So this is the Michigan Good Food Charter. So this was developed in 2009 and 2010. It has 6 goals. It has 25 objectives. It had a number of different working groups. Hundreds of people participated. But this, I would say, is the guiding document of good food work here, good food work in Michigan. So what I'd like you to do is to take about 5 minutes and read this and then consume this. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is to share what you think in there is applicable to your situation and what is not. Because you should not take any model of what another organization has done and then plop it on your own, because it's not community-based. It's not based in your context. There may be some great ideas in there, and I think this document is great in so many ways, but I would highly advise you not to just adopt it wholesale. It needs to be vetted and talked about and relate to the lived experience of the people in your community.